What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for The Flash, Season 4, Episode 23, which is the season finale of Season 4. We are The Flash, which is a title that I have no idea why they named it that. This is something that Iris said earlier this season a couple times, and people hated it because I understand why they hated it. I didn't hate it that much, but I understand where they're coming from just because the line makes no sense. We are The Flash. Like Iris was saying, like, she and Barry are both the Flash. That's stupid. She didn't earn that at all. Barry obviously did. He's been the Flash for 4 years at that point, or 3 years. So I didn't hate it, but a lot of people didn't like it, and I understand it. But the fact that they're naming the season finale "We Are the Flash" is such a middle finger to the fans, just because, like, I looking at it from the trailer breakdown, I thought maybe there's gonna be something that will justify the title "We Are the Flash." Maybe the Flash will, like, just like DeVoe became a lot of himself, maybe he will become a lot of himself. Like, maybe there'll be a lot of Flashes teaming up against a lot of DeVoes. I didn't really know. But it turns out there was none of that. There was no "We Are the Flash" in this episode, and it's just such a middle finger to the fans. The title is such a stupid title for this episode that it's just so bad. I hate the fact that they named it "We Are the Flash" just because that has nothing to do with this episode, and it's such a middle finger to the fans who really hated that line. But diving into the episode, we see in the previous episode that DeVoe set off the Enlightenment, and Barry was like, I have no idea what to do, and that was a cool ending to that episode, just because I like the fact that DeVoe actually set off the Enlightenment. But we see in this episode that other than turning off people's technology, we didn't see the Enlightenment at all, which is a little underwhelming and a little disappointing for me, just because it's always cool for the villain to actually succeed in his plan, but for the hero to take him out then, but he didn't really succeed. He just turned off technology for an hour, which is a little underwhelming. But I think the real problem with this is because, like, I probably wouldn't have had a problem with this if we actually explored all this technology being turned off actually affecting people, because we really didn't, like, at all. People said there was chaos. We saw like second shots of it, but really we didn't see the world affected by this proto-enlightenment before it actually turned on. With all the technology in the world being turned off, that would affect a lot of people and would affect the whole world. So we should have seen more of that. And I think the big reason we didn't is because we spent so much time in DeVoe's mind, which was not a very interesting setting, in my opinion. It was just Central City without anything in it other than that Speed Force portal from the beginning of the season, and a dead Clifford DeVoe, and a picnic, and Ralph Dibny, which I will talk about in a minute. But that's all it is. It was just that, and I didn't really like that. It was just such a boring setting. I would have much preferred to see him fight the Thinker outside in Central City in the purple light. It would have been an interesting lighting and an interesting, like, visually it would have looked interesting. Now, I get why they went to DeVoe's mind, because, I mean, they needed to get Ralph back somehow, which I like the fact that he's back. I will talk about that in a minute, like I said, but I feel like they should have spent less time in DeVoe's mind, a little less time, just because it's such a boring setting that it really takes away from the episode. It takes away from exploring how the proto-enlightenment affected the world. It takes away from, like, visually, it's not very interesting. So it would have been better if they spent less time in DeVoe's mind and more time in the real world just fighting DeVoe. Now, I did like the fact that they were in DeVoe's mind at all. I like the fact that they were there, but they should have been there for less. But the fact that it brought Ralph back is a huge plus, just because, honestly, Ralph is my favorite character, my favorite new Arrowverse character from this season, which is really surprising. I did not see that coming. I would have expected it to be a main villain like Ricardo Diaz, which turned out to not be my favorite villain, my character from the new seasons at all. Maybe the Thinker, maybe one of the Legionnaires from Supergirl, but I did not expect it to be the elongated man. It turned out it was, and the fact that he died didn't bother me. Like, I knew he was going to come back. I thought he was going to come back, but if he stayed dead, that would have sucked. So I guess I did not dislike his death, because I mean because of it we got a lot of great moments from Barry, just remembering what he did and thinking he was guilty because of it. So I like the fact that he quote unquote died, because he didn't really die. His body was taken over and his mind was still in there. Now I don't really understand. Like, they could have explained the fact that he's alive just by saying that his body's still alive, so he's still alive. But instead they said, like, DeVoe's keeping him alive, which I did not like that line, because they didn't really explain that. They said that DeVoe's keeping you alive because he's not letting you out. And that didn't make any sense to me. So they could have just explained it by saying Ralph's body is still alive, so his mind must still be alive, because every other bus meta's bodies are dead. So I think they should have just explained it like that. But instead they're really confusing around, which I don't really understand why they did that. But either way, the fact that the elongated man is back is a huge plus for me, just because he's one of my new favorite characters, and definitely my favorite new Arrowverse character from the new seasons. Before all of this, though, there was Marlize coming and helping the Flash, because like that's something that the season has been building to for a while now. Just Marlize betraying Defoe, which she did in a couple episodes ago, and we saw more of that in the last episode of Iris and Harry going to get her and get her help. So I like the way they did that. Now I think she should have probably died in this episode, just because, for one reason, just to raise the stakes of this episode, just because this episode had basically no stakes to it. It just no stakes. It felt like nothing in terms of stakes. So they could have killed off Marlize for like Defoe to really look more scary and more menacing, and to up the stakes. They should have 100% done that, because like there's no room for her anymore in the show. She left the show. She's leaving. She's never gonna come back, almost definitely. So they should have just killed her off for those reasons, to raise the stakes, to make Defoe look more menacing and ruthless. Just for those reasons, I think that, again, they should have killed her off. That's a huge missed opportunity, in my opinion. But the fact that she's helping Team Flash makes a lot of sense. I like the way they built that up, and the fact that she came up with the idea to go into Defoe's mind, even though Defoe's mind was a pretty uninteresting setting. It made sense for her to come up with the idea, and not for anybody else on Team Flash, and for her to come up with the means to get Barry into Defoe's mind. Just because it wouldn't make sense for anybody else on Team Flash to do it, and they needed to do that to get Ralph's, or to get Defoe out of Ralph's body. So the big battle fight scene of this episode was like the big superhero versus villain fight scene of the episode. Kind of sucked. It was the Flash and Elongated Man versus the Thinkers. It was just so underwhelming, just because I feel like they could have done so much more with it. It would have been such an interesting fight scene if like the Thinker was like by himself fighting the Flash and the Elongated Man, and just like being slightly overwhelmed because there's more than one of them, because like maybe Marlize is talking to him through Barry. So that throws him off guard, just because they could have done so much more interesting than what they did. All they did was have a bunch of Defoes, and Barry and Ralph, first of all, he was just dodging their hits somehow, and then all they do is punch him and run through them and mow through those Defoes, which was so underwhelming and boring, in my opinion. They could have done so much more with this end of the season battle between the main hero and the main villain, along with the Elongated Man. They could have just done so much more with it, which is one of the big things that was so underwhelming about this episode. It was that, and it was the lack of stakes. It was just no stakes, and there weren't really any emotional moments. Even though Ralph came back to life, it wasn't all too emotional. I didn't love this episode as much as I should have, just because it's a season finale, and the last episode was just so much better. Another thing is, and I promise this is the last time I'll be negative in this review, is the way that they defeated Defoe was so stupid. All they did was run into or go into his mind. Like half an hour later, they got the Elongated Man and ran him out. This whole time, that's the way they defeat Defoe, by taking the Elongated Man out. I think they could have done it so much better by just like having Ralph actually push him out of his body, and with some like Marlize said, the Team Flash's emotional connection to Ralph was the reason that he survived. But they could have had an awesome scene of everyone on Team Flash cheering Ralph on and like pushing the Defoe out of his mind. It would have been a little cheesy, but I think it would have probably been better than this, just because all they did here was run Ralph out of Defoe's mind, or out of that doesn't really make any sense. So like that's one of the things I didn't like about this episode. I know I've been pretty negative about this review, but I promise that's it. The rest of the review will be 100% positive. So after that, there was the satellite thing falling from the sky, Barry and the then unnamed mystery girl destroying the satellite. I didn't really get how they reverse time. Who knows? Maybe that's one of the mystery girls, or Nora's powers this season. Like, not this season. Like in general, maybe that's one of her powers that for some reason she has, and Barry and all the rest of the speedsters don't. I mean, she is unique in the fact that she has two colors in her lightning. So maybe she's unique in other ways. Like she can reverse time in some way, because I didn't really understand how they did that. Maybe it was just for visual effect, I'm not really sure, but that whole scene of Barry and Nora destroying the satellite was a great scene. It visually looked great. I would have loved to see more things like that in this season, in this episode, I mean, just because it was in Central City and it was just more interesting just to look at. So that whole scene of them destroying the satellite using the supersonic punch was awesome. Speaking of Nora, the Mystery Girl's identity was revealed. Everybody expected her to be named Dawn Allen, but her actual name is Nora Allen, and she's 100% a version of Dawn Allen, because she is Barry and Iris' daughter from the future, and I don't know why they named her Nora, just because, I mean, it makes more sense for her name to be Nora than Dawn, just because, like, we know Barry's mother was named Nora, and she died, so that makes sense, I guess, but I know I said I'm going to be 100% positive, and this isn't really a complaint, but it's a little annoying why they didn't just name her Dawn Allen. Maybe just for like a thing where everybody's expecting one thing for her to be Dawn Allen, but then oops, her name is Nora Allen. I just didn't really like that all too much. It's not 100%. It's not really a complaint. It's just her name, and she's a pretty minor character in any comic book. But I don't really understand, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know. I don't understand why they named her Nora instead of Dawn Allen. But her reveal was also really interesting, and it makes me a little bit more interested in the next season, and to see what she did and how that will lead to the main villain of the next season or the villains of the week in the next season. So that was pretty cool as well. And there was the Harry subplot, which was probably the only emotional part of the episode, which, I mean, it wasn't really that emotional, just because I didn't really like the subplot this season of him going dumb and then he's smart again, or not really that smart. I didn't really like that throughout the season, but in this episode I thought it was done pretty well. In conclusion, this episode was definitely one of the most underwhelming season finales I've ever seen, just because, I mean, I should expect that at this point, just because it's The Flash. They haven't really made or produced any amazing season finales at this point. I mean, Arrow has made 4 season finales, and I know they've had 2 extra seasons to do so, but The Flash hasn't done any at all, so that's a little disappointing, and this episode in general was a little disappointing. There were things I liked, like the destroying the satellite thing, Nora Allen being revealed, although it's a shame her name is not Dawn Allen, and Ralph being back. I liked all of that, but there were a lot of things that were just so underwhelming about this episode that I can't really give it a great score, so I'll give this episode an 8.5 out of 10, but let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and thanks.